But yeah, what a movie.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Wow.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Just one of those where you're like,
Nah. One thing that did shock me about it, and this is just a warning to audience members, if you haven't seen it yet, this is not a children's movie. By any stretch of the human imagination.
No.
In no way, shape, or form.
it's not a movie for a lot of adults.
Yes, I mean, the news said that, you know, it's a gory movie, there's a lot of violence and so on. I figured with how much hype they had over the violence.
Yeah, we were like...
It was going to be a disappointment.
How bad could it be? People
exactly.
probably just overreacted.
Exactly.
Because I
Given how many
remember
Christians
when,
out there saying it's so violent, it can't be that bad.
Because I remember when Braveheart came out.
Yes.
And I hadn't seen it. I didn't see it when it first opened, and the people who had seen it were like, "Oh, but watch out for those battle scenes because there's some of the bloodiest stuff." And I saw it finally. I was like, okay, it's a couple guys get their arms chopped off, but you know, it wasn't that bad. You know, some gore, but it wasn't over the you know, it wasn't beyond the pale.
Yeah. But yeah, this movie was definitely different. Like I say, I wasn't expecting that much.
Yeah.
I guess the highlight that you were referring to would probably be the scene where Jesus gets scourged.
Yes,
which is
most likely.
I mean, you know, certainly the most. I mean, it's a hard scene to take, regardless of your beliefs.
Exactly.
You know, the scourge is a great big whip with big honking
Chunks of
spikes on the end.
Pieces of glass.
Right. Exactly. It's sort of like Cat of Nine Tails style.
And they go over him in loving slow motion detail.
Yeah. Mel loves his slow-mo. When it's like any violence, it's like he's
ripped up.
Just overcrank the camera and leave it.
Chest, and people in the audience were gasping with shock.
Yeah. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them in the least.
Now, it was interesting to me because I'm watching this, right? And I start thinking of other films that are kind of similar.
You mean ones that are up to an equal level of gore? Or?
Well, I mean, you know, I don't have, as a general rule, a problem with violent entertainment.
Neither do I.
I mean, I've got, in my DVD collection, I've got Italian horror films and Japanese Yakuza films that are pretty sickening.
Starship Trooper, Gladiator, I like them.
I mean, well, I'm thinking of like Ichi the Killer and Versus and movies that are just really beyond the pale. Stuff that you couldn't make, presumably, in America. You probably can now. And I'm starting to think about, okay, the point of using violence or any sort of extreme content in your entertainment, you know, and of course Mel's whole, I think, intent is like, yes, it's supposed to disgust you and horrify you and sicken you because you're supposed to feel what, you know, you're supposed to understand the
like,
the
oh my
intensity
gosh,
of
my sin did this to me.
Right, that's the whole idea.
That is, I mean, you know, passion plays are a very time-honored tradition, and that's what they're for.
And so at that point, I think it just becomes a matter of your own, I guess, personal judgment whether, you know, 10 minutes of someone being flayed alive on screen nonstop that gets the point across any more effectively than 4 or 5 minutes of that.
Or in this case, 2 hours.
Or because this
2
movie,
hours and 6 minutes to be exact.
Yes, because the first 5 minutes, he's fine.
Yeah.
The last 5 minutes, he's okay. Every minute
Everything
in
between,
he is being beaten
with sporadic flashbacks.
He is hamburger.
Exactly. By the end of the movie, he is hamburger meat.
And Jenny, my wife, is a little jaded. She said, "Oh, it's just a latex suit."
What? Yeah, boy, I just imagine, you know, just the effects department just bringing in barrels.
They supported them.
Yeah, and I was kind of half wondering, like, whether they had continuity problems. Like, you know, oh shoot, yesterday he had a scar here and here, and you know, oh, this is out of place. But again, you wouldn't notice.
Yeah, it's not like continuity with sand on the beach. You know, the grains are, you know, in a different position, he's got so much.
He's got an army of continuity people with Polaroids taking photographs of the cobblestones at the end of every day. Make sure, like, where the blood splatters are. But it's it certainly, it definitely was. I mean, it took the wind out of you even to watch it. It was unpleasant. I was, but again, it was like, did it work as film narrative? And this is where I'm not sure it did, because one thing that was clearly obvious about the movie was that Mel's making this movie for Christians.
Oh, yes.
Right? Yeah. All of this talk you're hearing about in the news right now, and editorials and reviews that are coming out, and especially from supporters of the film. And even before it came out, you had the evangelical Protestant right, which is not usually a group of people that you would see, allying themselves with some Mary worshiper like Mel Gibson, right?
Yeah.
They're all talking about how this is going to be
Catholics bad.
Yeah, this is going to be this amazing conversion tool. This will be. They were comparing it to the movie the Jesus movie from like 1980 or something, the one that got put on video and sent to everyone. And, and it's been, and that has been a movie that for about 25 years now has been trundled off to obscure parts of the world by missionaries to show the little, the Bushmen in in Africa and to convert them. And I think
wait till the Bushmen get a load of this.
Boy, it's going to start some wars. But but the reason, what the problem with this film as a narrative was that, as you said, it starts in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah.
And then immediately Jesus is hauled off, arrested, and the beatings begin.
There is very, very little storytelling involved.
You get no context for this violence.
If you don't know who Jesus and Peter and Mary is, you won't find out for this movie.
in a sense.
Now you can argue that certainly most of the people going to see this movie, especially in America, are going to know the Jesus story.
Of course.
Certainly all Christians are. Most atheists are. And so you could say, well, that isn't probably going to be that big a problem. But just looking at it strictly as a film narrative, when you don't give a context for
exactly why we're going to beat this guy for the next 2 hours.
So why we should care? I mean, what the film doesn't do, what the script doesn't do, is establish Jesus as a character, establish who he is, what he does, and why it is that he pisses these people off so badly that they beat him to death. And again, even arguing that, okay, most people going in are going to know who Jesus was and what he taught, and you should love everyone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Does the film, because it lacks this context, taken in its own right, just constitute an exploitation movie?
Yeah, it is. It doesn't explain anything.
Yeah. Is it just? This is. I read one negative review said it was Christploitation. It's a new film genre, Christploitation.
Yeah.
Because it really is. I mean, it's almost pornographic violence.
It's not new though. I mean, they've been trying to do this. They just didn't have the technology yet to do such great special effects, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think that what Mel Gibson didn't want to do was just a Jesus movie like all other Jesus movies have always been, which would have been, okay, here's Jesus and he's born in the manger, and then he goes and he teaches, and then it ends with the... I think he wanted to focus just on the scourging and the crucifixion.
Yeah, but that's what a passion play is.
Right. So that's...
I mean, so it's not new, but it's new to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But another issue that I would like to mention about the movie... Now, Martin, you're kind of a film student, right? Can you tell me how many pages of script equals, how a page of script translates into a unit of time?
The general rule is when you're script writing, it's a page per minute. It's a minute of screen time per page of script.
Okay, so 200 and...
so 120... A standard film script is 120 pages.
Yeah.
That's standard, 120 pages.
Right, okay. The scenes with Jesus getting executed in the Bible, way shorter than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exterior...
even if you put all 4 Gospels together, I think, way shorter than 120 pages. So there's a lot of filler in the movie.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of slow.
Yeah, he made an entire 2-hour film based on John 19:1.
Right.
Yeah. And they scourged him.
One verse.
Yeah.
Scourged him.
He spent 20 minutes on it though.
Right.
But looking at it from an atheist perspective, I thought to myself, okay, if I was some guy and I knew nothing about Christianity and and the basic story of it, this would not necessarily win me over.
Yeah.
So in that regard, I don't know that the movie's successful. It is just this big act of preaching to the choir.
I mean, people are going to have to face up to the fact that the whole of Christianity focuses on an extremely violent event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They celebrate it. I mean, hymns are written about the blood. I'm washed in blood. That's kind of gross if you think about it.
Yeah, and for people who take the whole the transubstantiation aspect of
cannibalism.
Yeah, that's
the bread and wine.
Yeah, that's that practice. If they take that aspect seriously, that's even creepier.
Yeah.
Right.
But I thought there were 2 movies that I was thinking of when I was watching Passion of the Christ that I thought were kind of similar. Well, there were more than two.
Kill Bill.
Well, see, not even Kill Bill, because see, Kill Bill, and I'm going to talk about Kill Bill in just a second.
Okay.
But Kill Bill was like sort of understood that from the moment you watched it, that the whole movie, it was just this homage to cheesy pulp movies, right? And Hong Kong, violent action, martial arts, campy stuff. This is a movie that takes place in the world of B movies. Yeah. And it was never meant to be taken seriously, and it was so over the top, that there was really no risk of it offending anybody, unless you're just not basically squeamish person. But no, there were two movies I thought of. One, coincidentally enough, it also had Monica Bellucci in it. Was a movie that came out last year called Irreversible. Have you seen this movie?
No.
Anybody seen this movie? Okay. So a movie came out. This is a French movie. Came out last year. It caused a lot of fuss, right? Because it's a movie that's told in reverse time.
Oh, like Memento.
Yeah, but even more like, tunnel vision focused than that. It's told in like literally reverse time.
There was an episode of Seinfeld that was like that.
But Seinfeld was never like this. Basically, Irreversible is about it's about these three people. It's like this sort of this love triangle of people, and what happens to them when this tragic event happens in their lives, right? And it's told with the climax coming first, the bad stuff coming first, and then it kind of goes back and shows like the characters' lives before this happened.
Right.
And so there's this added sense of tragedy because like what's going to happen to them while you're watching them having happy lives, and they don't. And you're kind of like, oh, and so it's really disturbing. But the first 20 minutes of the movie, basically the movie opens with this, one of the most violent murders I've ever seen on a screen. And then it goes back and shows the event that inspires this murder, and you find out that this murder is a revenge killing. And basically what you have is this, there's this scene where Monica Bellucci gets raped in this underground tunnel. Okay, and the whole scene it's one shot, okay, for 10 minutes. So it's like the Jesus scourging scene. You have Monica Bellucci getting sodomized in this underground tunnel for 10 minutes. He just plants the camera down, and you watch this, and you're like, okay. And then
I'm a little uncomfortable, man.
And then the movie goes back in time and shows like what led up to that. Like, why did she, end up in the tunnel, and then what led to that, and then what led to that, and then what led to that. And so this is a movie that caused a lot of stink. And but the movie does present these violent acts in a narrative context.
Yes.
Okay. Which you can argue sort of gives it a moral perspective. I mean, it's not necessarily just exploitation. It's still disgusting.
Right.
But
there's a reason behind it.
But again, here's what I thought was, you'll never want to see it if you can even make it through those two scenes. You'll never watch the movie again. Is that okay? Here's a movie that basically has two violent scenes in its first 20 minutes. Okay, and then it goes on for about another, hour and a half. Just essentially, it's a normal movie. It's almost a romantic comedy. Okay, essentially, but no real objectionable content at all, right? It just shows these people's lives, and this movie has to be released unrated in America because it would have got an NC-17, and they didn't want to release it with that rating. Okay, so here's a movie that is basically released as adults only. You can see this. We got 20 minutes of violence, okay, on the screen. Now here you have this 2-hour violent film.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 hours of solid.
Perpetual violence.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Blood is coming out of him in just like
there's breaks in the form of 30 seconds flashbacks.
Yeah, it's like
those are the only times when there is not violence.
Right. You flash, and then it comes back and it's like crunch, right? And this is
they go out of their way to make it as bloody as possible because it's not even just violence in the form of Schwarzenegger. He's blasting guns everywhere.
Right, yes, I will blow you up.
This is showing, the glass shards coming down and slicing open his back.
Yeah.
And it is explicit. They're trying to do it as much as possible.
And this film gets an R rating from the MPAA, which means that parents can take kids.
Exactly.
Right?
Kids can go see this.
And I'm just boggled by that. And it occurs to me, if it had been anybody else on a movie screen getting that kind of violent treatment, okay, this is an NC-17 movie.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the movie you're talking about, the violence also involved sex, which is more likely to get you an NC-17. In fact, Ebert, in reviewing this movie and saying this may be the most violent movie I've ever seen, also commented that it's real easy to get an NC-17 for sex, but very hard to get an NC-17 for violence if there's not sex involved.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I've spoken to like horror directors who tell me all their tales of woe of having to like submit and resubmit their movie to the MPAA because they're like. The MPAA sends it back, and they're like, no, you can't have a big spike going in the guy's eyeball. You got to cut. And so he has to trim that out, right? And they tell all these stories about just how inconsistent the MPAA is, right? Like they submit the movie, and then they say, no, take this out, and then they'll take that thing out, and then they'll submit it again, and then they'll be fine with that scene now. But then there's another one that they suddenly have a problem with that they didn't have a problem with the last time, and they want that dealt with, and dealing with them is nuts. So you can get NC-17 for violence, but usually those movies tend to just be trimmed down, or the rating gets changed on appeal. But you're right. I mean, you have this movie in theaters right now, The Dreamers, which is NC-17, which is like this youth love triangle sex movie that's got like a little nudity in it and some kinky sex stuff. Zero violence, right?
Right. They like, every time a new American Pie movie comes out, they release it, this big hyped unrated version, and it's like really almost the same as the
there's like
the theater version.
3 extra seconds or something. but it occurred to me, it's like, well, so why does this movie get an R with this degree of violence in it? And it's pretty obvious. It's the Jesus story. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I can see the MPA saying, okay, well, we can't give this an NC-17 if it's because it's a movie about Jesus Christ. Yeah. It's a Christian film.
It's about love.
And NC-17 movies are all porn, right? Or should be, so we can't. So this is a case of, I think, this film, because of its subject matter and promoting Christianity, getting some special dispensation from the ratings board. Yeah. And that, I think, it's infinitely more disturbing to me that parents will take their kids in droves to see high school groups. Exactly. And school groups are going from churches, are going in busloads to see this film.
I cannot agree with that.
They never take them to see The Dreamers.
Because it's absolutely
even
horrid.
if they could get in,
it's a horrid movie.
And that just it just makes me uncomfortable that I live in a country where, this split-second flash of Janet Jackson's boob, right? Causes this nationwide furor. Okay. And yet people are, and yet this 2-hour snuff film starring Jesus is considered family. And I can understand you say, okay, well, the Janet Jackson thing was sort of sprung unsuspectingly on people. You can make that point, but still,
people are getting upset about it when it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah,
if you look at Europe, you're looking at Europe, and they're all saying, "What is the freaking big deal? What's up with you stupid Americans?"
Well, even here, I mean, if you've got cable, if you've got HBO, and you watch Sex and the City and stuff like that,
but it's like that's got a warning saying, "Kids, do not watch this."
Yeah. But again, it's just this nanosecond shot of Janet Jackson, and people are up in arms, and you practically got the crowds of peasants in the streets with torches, and but this, and I think that it's because what we have, the wonderful thing about our Christian culture, right, is that it has turned us into this sexually puritanical nation that worships violence.
If we can't get our jolly through sex, we have to get through violence.
Can I say a few words about the anti-Semitism angle?
Yes, you can. Our resident.
I'm our resident non-observant Jew. Not even nearly as not nearly as observant as my sister Karen is, who is also an atheist. And so the big controversy surrounding this movie has been: is this movie anti-Semitic? Let's see. I want to be fair about this, and I'm going to say kind of. Okay. I mean, on the one hand, you got a lot of bad Jewish characters. You have a few good Jewish characters. You also have some bad Roman characters. I mean, some really, despicable human beings who are the Roman characters. I mean, there's these two guys who are taking quite a bit of pleasure in this work of doing bad things to Jesus.
Yeah, I read something where Gibson's direction to them was act like you're throwing a baseball. When
So the Romans don't get off the hook in this, but the high up important Romans do get off the hook.
Oh yeah,
very much.
I mean, Pontius Pilate, who basically lays down the final order to crucify him. he's portrayed as a really nice guy in this movie.
Yeah,
I mean,
he does everything in his power not to do it.
I don't want to crucify Jesus, but this bloodthirsty mob of Jews is telling me to. And this is biblical. I'm not going to pretend that it's not biblical.
No, if you read chapter 18 of John,
where the Jews say, "Yeah, crucify him," and it's our fault too.
And Pilate is saying, "I can find no basis for charging against him." Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not saying that this is not true to the original story.
But Gibson really goes out of his way
to focus on
not only are the Roman... not only are the Roman characters shown in the best possible light, I mean, the important high-up Roman characters, but I think the high-up Jews are shown in the worst possible light. I mean, you've got Caiaphas...
Bloodthirsty.
Every single thing in the movie is his fault. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty. Well, again, if you read chapter 18 of John, right, it's pretty much it plays out like that, right? You have Jesus arrested and he's hauled up before Caiaphas, and who interrogates him, and it's almost like a scene out of some mob movie, right? Because you have. Caiaphas is standing there, and he's got his little henchman.
Exactly.
Standing next to Jesus, right? And you almost imagine them with these little fedora hats. And anytime Jesus gives some smart-ass answer that the priests don't like
smack him around.
Yeah, I go, well, as a matter of fact, I am the Son of God. And they don't care for that answer too much, so they rough him up, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, let's try that again. No,
I mean.
So it's not, and then they take him and they bring him before Pilate, and Pilate, has a very gentle. It's almost like they have this little philosophical discourse.
Right. Like, oh, I'm so tormented by this fact that I might have to crucify this guy who I think is innocent. But what can I do?
I find no basis for. I find no basis for a charge against him.
Yeah. Now Caiaphas. Well, okay. What I'm going to say is there's this whole group of people in who are the Jewish temple elders. They're all the bad guys. Now, you can make a case that there are some really nice Jewish people. I mean, they even go out of their way to say, here, this guy who's carrying the cross, you, help him carry the cross, Jew. So they try to draw attention to that.
I like that scene from The Life of Brian Bedder. Oh, let me shoulder your burden for you. Thank you. Just runs off.
Yeah. But, the message I mean, cynically, I kind of suspect that the message there is, well, if you're a Jew who's actually involved in promoting the Jewish religion, then you're bad. So, so the little people, the Jews who are just going around their daily lives, they're not bad. But the people who are actually involved in getting people to be Jewish, very, very bad.
Right. Well,
and that's my take.
Well. Again, well, certainly it follows the Gospels in that regard, and of course most historians have pointed out that this movie is overtly ahistorical in terms of Pilate's characterization. I mean, Pilate was a bloodthirsty bastard. Right? I mean, he was recalled from his post.
Yeah.
Because he crucified so many people. He was he even sort of offended Tiberius, the emperor, with how ruthless he was, and Tiberius was not exactly, Mickey Mouse in terms of being, mass murdering emperors, right? I mean, Tiberius is the guy who's you get the quote, "Let them hate me so long as they fear me." Okay, that's how bad he was, right?
Yeah.
So it's pointedly ahistorical, and then you have like these little bits that Gibson tossed in, like Pilate's wife bringing the towels to Mary.
Isn't she nice?
Yeah.
And what do they use these towels for?
And they mop the blood.
They mop up his blood.
And which is a scene that Gibson invented. But.
Another interesting one that they did have in there, which was definitely an interesting spin, was they had the character of the devil.
Yes.
Which I must say, in the very beginning, I thought it was God.
No, I didn't. When the worm crawled out of its nose?
Well, for the first, 2 minutes or whatever when he was speaking, I thought it was a representation of God.
Huh.
Instead of having his booming voice or something like that.
I knew it wasn't because I heard the Bible Answer Man that evening, and he was mentioning that the devil was played by a woman, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although when you watch it, if you don't know, it's either a very effeminate man or a very butch woman.
Yeah.
It's very gender ambiguous.
Yeah.
Well, it is an actress playing the role, and then a male voice was dubbed.
Oh, I didn't know.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So to make it gender ambiguous.
Jeff D. mentioned, who I also saw the movie with, mentioned that this is a very Catholic thing, that people not fitting into their defined gender roles is extremely evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
not necessarily a Catholic thing these days.
Shed some light on the current gay marriage controversy.
Yeah.
No.
But yes, that was a very interesting aspect of the movie. I found that they had that devil character going throughout it.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they kind of show the defeat of the devil character. So it was a very interesting way to kind of show what had happened and what's going on with Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, there were some narrative things that I thought he did very interesting.
Yeah.
Some visual representations.
Oh.
Certainly it was the most beautifully shot snuff movie I've ever seen. Don't get
None of this 8mm stuff here.
Yeah.
So.
Isn't it technically not? I mean, I'm being nitpicky, but it's not a snuff movie if
Well,
somebody
no,
doesn't
I mean,
actually die.
No, but I mean, the idea being that.
One last thing I want to throw in before we go to colors.
Sure.
Judas hangs himself. You know there are opposing versions, one of which Judas throws himself off the cliff.
Yeah.
They don't even try to resolve those. So now we know, thanks to Mel Gibson, the part about him throwing himself off the cliff is not divinely inspired. Thank you, Mel.
Yeah,
Yes.
must not be. Yeah.
And given how the rest of the movie went, I'm kind of glad that they went with a plain bear hanging.
Yeah.
Because the other one, he would have been a landmine and just exploded on the screen or something.
No, that would have been, yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Well, just to wrap this up, and we'll take to callers. This obviously because of all the pre-release hype and all the publicity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This movie, I think, it's like 117 million in its first 5 days.
I heard 20 million the first day is what I heard.
26 million the first day, but its first 5 days, I think it was like the fourth or fifth biggest 5-day opening ever.
Wow.
Okay.
Really?
If I never want to hear Mel Gibson get on any talk show again. He can complain about this, that, or the other, but if I hear him complain about how he's being persecuted for his movie, right?
Yeah.
Please.
This guy he got a 3,000 screen release for a movie that ordinarily would have died in art houses, right? I mean, it's not even a foreign language film. It's a dead language film.
Yeah.
Okay, with subtitles. It's hyper violent.
You're reading the entire movie.
He got an R rating for a movie that any other movie would have gotten an NC-17 for. This amount of violence, and he's making 100. It's 117 million first 5 days. It's probably going to top out around 280, 250 or 280. Half of which is going to go directly into his pocket. If that's persecution, sign me up.
There is no better publicity for a flick than having controversy surround it. And
there's no easier controversy
we here are
than
probably contributing to that because people might go and say, that sounds I want to see for myself.
Yeah.
But we're not about saying you shouldn't see this movie.
Yeah.
Because
It's
unlike
a movie
Christians,
based on the
we're not
story.
trying to prevent people from seeing stuff. We're like, well, this is interesting. In fact, I think that this movie is a good antidote for.
Yeah.
I 100% support any filmmaker making any film that they see fit to make. And if there had been a sort of movement to try to inhibit him making this movie or try to inhibit the release of this movie, try to suppress it or anyway, I would have come out foursquare against that.
Yeah.
So I'm totally for freedom
Mel
of
makes
artistic.
off like a bandit in making this movie. More power to him.
Yeah.
But again, just final note on it, I guess. If you are going to see this, it's horrifically violent. It is horrifically gory.
Yeah, no, don't take the kids. For
no
real.
kids should go see this.